today we have, oh, so now just fair warning, everyone, we are being recorded, and these are actually up pretty quickly on the Ollie website for other people to view and for you to share. So that's kind of nice. Gets us a bigger audience. So this class is titled The Other Side of the Berkshires. And the focus is really, you know, when you're not at Jacob's Pillow or Tanglewood, what else is going on in our neighborhoods? What's the real deal? And of course, who better to talk about that than nonprofit leaders? You all were chosen by me as the teacher or interviewer of this class to obviously talk about the serious issues in our county, but also because you're all very, very active just generally in the nonprofit sector and in your own subsector. You come to things, you show up in public. Most people should know who you are, but if they don't, this is the perfect opportunity for people to get to know us. And what I like about it is it's rather intimate. It's just us. It's pretty informal. And the questions are pretty simple. And the idea is for people to get to know you a little bit better and your organization and your mission and sort of what you need right now. Because many people at this moment in time, and maybe always, are wanting to get involved and give back. And so if we can explain to them how their skills and experience might be helpful to furthering our missions, we've had a lot of requests for contact information. So you all, if you have a chance to pop it in the chat box, or Ollie will, just type in a way for people to get in touch with you should they be so inspired after we talk that they want to volunteer or donate or just get involved one way or another. So we now have about 10 people on. Hi, Ollie people. Thank you so much for joining us. So glad you have internet. That's pretty key to these Zoom meetings. So today we're going to start with Bridge and our founder and executive director, Gwendolyn VanSant. She founded Bridge, is it 12 years ago, Gwendolyn?
Yeah, working on our 13th year, yes.
Yeah, wow. I remember that. Very, very exciting at the time. And actually, tell us a little bit about you and your path to founding Bridge, and then we'll go into sort of what Bridge is up to now. It's grown quite a bit, so give us that little story, if you would.
So about 13 years ago, what I was doing in the community was interpreting for medical and mental health in Spanish, and in translating, written translation of IEPs, and teaching Spanish. And obviously I have a passion for Spanish and for the Latino community. And when I was doing that, I was realizing that the population had doubled in our Southern Berkshire area. So there was much more of a need. And also when I was arriving to support the families, I was noticing lots of gaps in cultural understanding. And not only for the clients I was serving, but also just for viewing me as a resource that could actually be helping institutions. So the founding mission of Bridge was to continue doing one-on-one advocacy when needed, but also circle back to institutions to create cultural capacity, which later evolved into the cultural competence training, and then later evolved into the equity inclusion consulting that we provide access to. But we remain with the same mission of having a direct line with community and really developing a side of us that's a community organizing side. And that informs the work that we do with nonprofits and corporations in cultural competence training.
So what of your background sort of did you bring to the table? Because obviously this is, well, first of all, the kind of facilitation you do is a serious skill and not many people have it. So we're lucky in our county to have you and to have Bridge. I sometimes think we could clone you 10 times and that still wouldn't be enough. But which part of your life what parts went into the
The
making
bridge.
of this?
I
Yeah.
I feel like actually every aspect of me. I sometimes say I'm the mother of diversity. I have four children. That the oldest, now 30, is non-binary, right, and African American. Born as a male and dealing with that as a black male. And then I have my second oldest lives with autism. My third has type 1 diabetes and is biracial, and my last is just the last of four, right? No, but also biracial and then living in this community. So I feel like I'm the mother of diversity first in my own experience, again, being a Black professional woman in the Berkshires. So those things are really important. And I go back to what brought me here is Simon's Rock. And so I was um, interested in art history because I wanted to be a lawyer to become an advocate for individuals, and had sort of what Simon's Rock equivalent of minors in Latin American studies and women's studies. So everything about Bridge being a minority and women-run nonprofit organization that's rooted in anti-racism work and immigrant advocacy feels like a culmination of all those things coming together. And what's actually very exciting at this very moment is it was a college decision not to go the history route for pre-law, because I just didn't have the attention span for it. I went for art history, which I found really enriching. So some of the arts capacity work that I've circled around to now at Bridge for the last couple of years is actually pulling on all of those old passions. So that's even fun and unexpected. So it really feels like it's all those things, and then the actual certifications and trainings and group work and anti-racism work and diversity leadership work, and like the deep autism training that I have, not just for being a mom, but professionally, and all those things. So there's a combination of a lot of things that make our brand of bridge work.
Which is pretty unique, actually, when you research um, groups like Bridge that are doing similar work. Bridge really has some unique aspects to it, which obviously come from your background for sure. What made you decide to stay in the Berkshires? I'm assuming, or are you local? I don't even know. Were you born and raised here?
No, Simon Drug brought me here. And I had my older children young, so I was a single mom. And I actually was keenly aware that I felt safer in this rural environment than I might have been able to feel in other urban areas and things like that. So it was really for me about the safety of my oldest, and as their identity was developing, noticing that this was a place that they felt comfortable in, spaces like this image behind me, which is a half mile from our home. Like, this was home to them, and that was the most important for me. And then I developed a community that I cared about and felt connected to. So those things kept me here, and the challenges were not having more diversity around me. Right, it took me a long time to get connected further up the county and have a larger community of my own identity, and that was hard. But,
Yeah, I mean that's a thing. That's a thing in the Berkshires, but it does feel safe for a lot of different types of people. Um, in a different way than New York City feels safe to me, that you can be anyone in New York and
yeah,
you can walk down the street and just be who you are. And that's spoken as a true New Yorker. But it's this rural area is beautiful, and I know we all appreciate how safe we actually feel here. I was looking at your email correspondence, and at the bottom of your email, it says, a leader takes people where they want to go. A great leader takes people where they don't necessarily want to go, but ought to be. And that quote is from Rosalind Carter. And I love that quote, and it pretty much sums up the work that you do. And so I'd love for you to tell us a little bit about that work, because you are the person who facilitates the hard conversation and hard conversations that we certainly need to have now. But you've been doing this for 13 years, and I know it's evolved quite a bit as the world evolves and as you evolve and as our community evolves. But tell us a little bit about the work of Bridge, and then we'll get after that to about the work of Bridge now amidst the pandemic and a Black Lives Matter movement. So let's start with the basics first, though, in case people don't know the depth of what you do.
yeah. So the range of our work mainly we do these two things. We're community organizers, and we do training, cultural competence training. So we go into schools, we work with police, we work in corporations, hospitals, whoever will have us up and down the county and beyond at this point, um, doing cultural competence training, which is teaching people language and skills to navigate cross culturally. In our training, embedded is an anti racism framework, a gender analysis, and also a poverty analysis, so that it is what distinguishes again our work, because we go right there. We don't dance around it in cultural competence training. People really need to develop language around the social constructs of race and gender, and then how that all feeds into the systemic issues we have around poverty and privilege. And so that's what we do, right? And that work um, fuels our community organizing work and racial justice work. And we have an entire racial justice mechanism. It's built of community volunteers and activists, and I'm constantly providing education to other nonprofit organizations monthly at our race task force meeting, and then also monthly in a community setting for activists and allies. And in that, there's also an invitation to engage in campaigns. So we work alongside all the agencies that attend that meeting, municipally and nonprofit wise, but we also have an allegiance with the Department of Justice Community Relations Division of the Civil Rights Division, and the ACLU, and the Immigrant Protection Program, and also in the Civil Rights Division. So um, we do that work on a community level, but we also have a regional kind of footprint with that work as well. And then um, in our community-based building bridges portion of our program, women to women is like it's the heartbeat of bridge, I always say, because I started interpreting, and mainly it was for women in our local health clinics. And I really was struck by the familiarity I had as a single mom with some of the immigrant moms coming in, and then also struck by things I thought I only studied in documentaries and Latin American studies were actually real live issues in the Berkshires, and I didn't know that, right? Trafficking and all these other things. So I have really stuck with women to women, funded or unfunded, saying that we bridge really can't exist without that, because there's a real connection to who we are as an organization. That group of women, they're people that have been with me for 10 years. We celebrate our 10th anniversary of that program. And they bring in women all the time that come and go, and find a home. And we help people get set professionally, family, networked with people in our community. And then we have Happiness Toolbox in our youth leadership program, which is really rooted in positive psychology and positive education. And it's providing the same skills I provide for adults at work for children, but really rooted in building up strength and building language around diversity that I don't have to do it for them when they're 50 in the workplace, right? They can learn this stuff when they're 5 to 13 and have more capacity to understand their own life experience and navigate difference. And it's all rooted in building character and community, so that's all that we do, and it all works together. And it's a very good role model. I mean, I think in urban settings, we arrive, and I always think, oh, how's this going to work transferring from rural areas to urban areas? But we kind of have all bases covered in the way that we do the work, so it works really well. But for our community, my vision has always been that people go home and have dinner conversations, and everybody have been touched with navigating these tough conversations and understanding, identity and how it impacts community. So that's it. And then we have campaigns in it, but those are the large buckets of our work.
So, for the average person who may have read about you or read about the work itself, um, what if an individual wanted to get a little bit more educated about these issues? Do you get calls from individuals? Is there a place for someone to kind of join with another group to get the same training and discuss the same issues?
Yeah, so right now in COVID, we've switched. We used to go train when a workplace called us. Right now, Bridge is putting on the trainings over Zoom, so we've had them monthly since May, so people can sign up and take our foundations training. There are other people that are signed up to be and train the trainer. Those monthly anti-racism meetings that we have are real good places to meet people in community, people that have those same passions, and get a sense of Bridge. And then there are instances where me or other team members coach individuals in work. But, so there's multiple ways to enter, right? And if you're a volunteer, you also get trained in the work, because if you're the front line of bridge, we want you to have the capacity to operate within our mission. So those are some of the ways.
So, have you ever tried to estimate how many people you have trained in this 13 years?
Yeah, I just always on grants write thousands. I really, I mean, it's quite amazing, and really we see hundreds of people in a month, and so, and that was before Zoom, and sometimes in Zoom I can look down and there's like 400 people in a training or something like that. So, um, I just think we've touched many, and sometimes still I want to poke my eyes out because people say they haven't heard about Bridge in our community. I'm like, ah. But we have a pretty I think good reputation, and we're continually just trying to increase awareness. Our biggest thing is we have found a lot of people during COVID time that need our services that didn't know we existed on the community level, and so we've really worked hard to kind of connect with families that need our support, getting connected with other services in the area or getting what they need.
So before we go to, what your world is like now,
Yeah.
can we assume that information for people on all these programs is on your website?
Yeah, and I think I over prepared. I made like a little intro PowerPoint that I could make a handout and put in the chat if you want, and people could
Yeah,
download it.
that'd be great.
Yeah,
That'd be
had
perfect.
like a little bit of just
Actually,
everything.
I would love for people, because I've been to one of these trainings, you know, really a small amount, but enough to open my eyes, right? I was wondering if there is an example of something that you could share with people that's kind of like the most basic, simple aha thing, whether it's about white fragility or whatever, there are terms now,
Yeah,
right? If you haven't done the training, you don't know the terms, but is there something that, people might relate to? And don't forget, Ollie folks are, we know this, right? Very, very well educated and have lived through some of the most interesting times in our lifetime. I'm not that far behind
yeah,
that group, but I'm sure that for those who haven't done any of this training yet, is there something
yeah.
interesting you can share with us
I
to
can
give them a
I
feel?
can just share. There's one thing that's our, we train in cultural competence. Our cultural competence rule is called the platinum rule, which most of us were raised in the golden rule, right? Of treat people how you would like to be treated, but that centers you and your values and your experience. The platinum rule is treat people how they would like to be treated, and what we do in our training is to build skills to do that. And then so that's one. I'll just do a few. And it's really important, that platinum rule, because it sounds simple, but really to build relationship and trust, to be able to ask and work alongside, is really crucial. And any kind of activism and engagement that you want to do across diversity. And then I would want to say that in the anti-racism work, we want people to understand that race is a social and political construct, and we're not doing any damning of individuals in character. We are all a result of our bias and how we're socialized, and so we want people to lean into understanding the term white supremacy culture, which just means there's a dominance of the white majority and the middle class white norms sort of um, drive institutions, right? And so when people can understand that and begin to, what we say is see the water we're in, right? Like if we were fish, like the stuff that we don't see, like begin to develop infrared glasses so we can see where these messages of people that are in and out, inside and outside. When we begin to see them, we can start fixing them. But if we go blindly through it, we can't fix it. So that leads to my next one of color blindness, which I was raised in my generation, and I'm sure everyone older, that color blindness was the way to go, right? Like they used Martin Luther King's quote, don't judge a person by the color of their skin. And we really try to train against this. When if you look at a cultural competence continuum, it's midway through being culturally competent, because you're not recognizing that everybody's had different paths to where they are right now, and that's informed by their social identities of race, class, gender, all those things, right? So our lives are not the same. We're hardly the same even when we come from the same family. So colorblindness just doesn't serve an understanding individuals. Another one that generationally, when you mentioned generation, my mind jumped to the term queer. So we do training around gender diversity too. And the term queer, it was the equivalent of the N word, you know, for people, again, my generation older, it was a slur. The new way of using that term is an identity that doesn't adhere to the social constructs of gender, which means that, you know, people can identify how they want to identify along the lines of gender identity and sexuality. So queer for the younger generations and for the sort of popular conversation right now is a term that doesn't mean what it meant before. And I can literally see that divide often in rooms across generational lines. And I've had people of older LGBTQ identity that have said, I don't accept that term, right? Just in the way that some people might say they don't accept the N word, although younger generations might say they've reclaimed the N word, right? So these are complicated things, and why we can't be colorblind or culturally blind, because people respond to the same thing differently. Um, and so those are some. I know you mentioned white fragility, and I think it's just that's a big bucket of work. You should watch Robin DiAngelo's TED Talk and get started. Pick up the book or watch the TED Talk. But just understand that understanding these times that are really complicated but are really important after the George Floyd's murder was broadcast, is that people need to lean into their fragility and understand that whiteness has to be deconstructed and has to be acknowledged. Whether there are any people of color around you or not, people need to be tackling their whiteness and understanding how it's impacted their existence and how it impacts people that aren't around them. Start questioning why there aren't people of color around you, right? So all of that work requires you being less than fragile and brave and honest. So I think those are some of the things I would say.
Yeah, thank you.
That,
That was the 5 minute primer.
I know, it's like,
So, all right, obviously, if we had done this class 6 months ago, right, everything would have been different. You were already one busy lady, and being one of the few trainers in our area, and you know, sort of the one of a really small handful of um, people who have been doing this work for a long time. But so now, you know, fast forward, we have a pandemic, the world is you know, falling apart, and now this huge Black Lives Matter social movement. These are big things, and you know, I personally am exhausted from, you know, trying to run a nonprofit and trying to address those issues and think about those issues and deal with that stuff. Pretty much everyone's got work to do. So now you're twice as busy, if that's even possible. But tell us a little bit about, you know, how you're thinking about these two things going on and how it affects Bridge and our community and you yourself, you know.
yeah. So I think you're right. You know, I'm worried. This is recorded, so that's good. I don't want people to think that I'm too busy, because this work is too important to be too busy. And we can figure it out. It means that sometimes I'm putting people in groups, right? They're not doing the work by themselves. They're doing them in groups of nonprofits. But I think that it's important that I don't want people to think that there isn't time for this, because there's nothing more important right now. Um, COVID-19 has attacked, you know, African American populations like more, right, and Latino populations more than other groups. And so that isn't just a story outside of the Berkshires, it's also a story inside of the Berkshires. And so I created that new Pathways program because I was seeing that instantly happening before my eyes in a week or two of us going into quarantine. And all the resources were going to sort of white-led organizations, the typical groups that people would have gone to, even prior to my working with them for the last 5 years. People sort of sprung back. And I know the brain science of like people go back to what they know, even if it wasn't healthy for them in times of trauma. But that made it really challenging for people, and people like me that had a heartbeat on Black and Brown communities or other vulnerable communities, to get what we needed right away. That we've worked and negotiated, and there's the new Pathways program that helped disrupt that. And so there's there's more of that happening now and more training happening, but there's a lot of relearning that's required. And so I've really attached to the food system that we have here to kind of we have a model at Bridge, and you'll see it in the PowerPoint of, we're serving 90 families over 23 weeks, getting them food, resource lists of other services in the area, art kits, like just trying to like make these families not fall off the edges, right? And certain populations like African American elders were totally forgotten in our Southern Berkshire community, and Bridge sort of reached out to make sure that they had what they need. So a lot of the blind spots, a lot of the issues that when people are digging deep into the racial bias work came up, right? And so that's been really important to respond to. Um, a lot of those Black Lives Matter statements, if I've had any relationship with organizations, I've talked to them about the process around it. The statement is really just the outward facing piece. It's the work that goes behind it that's really important. It doesn't mean you don't make a statement, but it just means you dig in and start working, and not claim things you can't claim. Be prepared to get the feedback you need to get as an organization. So I've been doing a lot of coaching and support in that area. So for me, those have been the main things. New Pathways was created for our partners and clients and sponsors to sort of have some information at their fingertips on Zoom. So if you go to our website, there's a whole series of talks, and there's actually audio of the labs that we did, which were community-based conversations about what do we do next. So all that's accessible for people. And then we and our volunteers and our racial justice group really started taking care of communities. We have 90 families, I said, that we're taking care of. And then training and working with United Way and the food service groups and all that stuff to kind of look at why we're missing the parts that we're missing so we can fix it.
It's interesting because you're not alone in serving as the trusted organization through which people who sometimes fall through the gaps can find what they need. Vim, we had Liana Toscanini on as well, and they ended up serving in that role as well. Many people ended up having to become food experts, really, to close all the gaps that we didn't really know existed before this. Our counterpart in the Metro West section of Massachusetts, she's a part-time employee for the Metro West Nonprofit Center. She is 100% of her time dealing with food distribution. So, this people need trusted organizations within their own communities. So there's a lot of that, thankfully, in the Berkshires, people working together to make that kind of no closed door thing happen, so that wherever you go, you can find whatever services you need. People will point you in the right direction. That's kind of what we do at the Nonprofit Center all the time, just to try to point people in the right direction. So we have about 15 minutes left. And I almost want to leave it to you. How long is your PowerPoint, out of curiosity?
Oh, I think I kind of covered a lot of it. It's
because we could just, certainly we'd like to have questions from Ollie folks. The class does go till 4, but at 3:15 we will be interviewing Constructs, so another nonprofit.
I could just show. I think I gave good background. I could just show the 4 slides about what we're doing now, which I kind of just talked about, but I could maybe get a little more nuanced. Okay. And then I'll send the whole thing if people are curious more about what Bridge does. Does that make sense?
So I hope that you should be able to share your screen. Do you have let's see if it works. If not, Andy will help us, I'm sure.
I think it's good. I've had more Zoom calls in my life than I.
Good. Oh, you're so savvy technically. Yay.
So I think this is data that you're probably familiar with, but this is one of the ones, Bridge does all the work I described, and we really see ourselves as serving public health, right? Like really helping people be healthy, because we believe that if anyone in our community is not healthy, none of us are healthy, right? We have to have a thriving community. So this data here just shows how in June, the CDC tracked how COVID was impacting people. And this is what we were seeing in our county on a small scale, but and not with deaths, but just what we talked about, access to resources, right? And what people had and could. So I think this is a good slide to see. You can all see it probably, I hope.
It's a little bit small in some of the types, so you may have to just take us through it.
Okay.
So we're looking at
I can read it.
the rates.
Yeah, so longstanding health and social inequities have put some members of racial and ethnic minority groups at increased risk of getting COVID 19 or experiencing severe illness, regardless of age. Among some racial and ethnic minority groups, including non Hispanic Black persons, Hispanics and Latinos, and American Indians, Alaska Natives, evidence points to higher rates of hospitalization or death from COVID 19 than among non Hispanic white persons. As of June 12th, age-adjusted hospitalization rates are highest among non-Hispanic, American Indian or Alaska Native, and non-Hispanic Black persons, um, followed by Hispanic and Latino persons. So the data points are, non-Hispanic, American Indian, or Alaska Native persons have a rate approximately 5 times that of non-Hispanic white persons. And non-Hispanic Black persons have a rate approximately 5 times that of non-Hispanic whites. And Hispanic or Latinos have a rate approximately 4 times that of non-Hispanic whites. So basically, it's Black people have 5 times the likelihood of white, and Latinos 4 times the white.
And this is nationally.
Yes.
Okay.
And so and so there's just a graph that says those same things. So this is like, to me, this is a slide that explains the pressure that was on people when the George Floyd uprising started, right? So you imagine Black elders dying off, right? People not being able to have funerals, people that, if we know of our other racial disparity data, that are isolated in many ways, first to lose their jobs. All of these things were happening. And then there was this broadcast of the George Floyd murder. So to me, this is a really important backdrop of the heightened stress and trauma that already was happening in Black communities, and then that broadcast murder. And so to me, that is the case for the Black Lives Movement uprising that's happening right now. And I've worked with a lot of people that have board members that are very much struggling with why the peaceful protests. Why couldn't they just be peaceful, right? And this isn't a peaceful time. It's violence against Black communities. So it's really important that people understand that and not try to qualify what's an okay way to uprise when you're faced with everything that I just described, right? So that's one way that data is important. And another way is what I talked about what Bridge is doing sort of at our home base, right? In our home community, for an organization like the one you described that didn't do food. We always did food for our Happiness Toolbox families and our Women to Women families as a regular for the last 10 years. That grew exponentially in the time of COVID. So at the 20-week mark, this is what we were doing. And really, it's the community of people that have been helping us distribute and deliver and also donate that have helped us get the resources back into community. I've been really touched by that. People have shown up regularly. People have donated regularly from literally across the country and also locally. And that money is just coming through Bridge and going right back out into these families and these communities. And so again, if whoever's watching, thank you if you're one of those people. And as far as we are in this time of COVID, people are going to remain vulnerable, and I hope that continues. And so we have an entire system that didn't exist in March now set up to do this work. And so I just want people to know about that. One of the social determinants of health is nutrition. Jane knows that. For housing is coming up next, but this is what determines public health and individual health. And then I hope everyone's seen this. And if you haven't, when you get this link where it says trailer, it's a link to watch all these different thought leaders speak about resilience. They speak about leadership. They speak about individual leadership and executive leadership and community health, and then actually some solutions of how do we begin to resource Black and Brown communities and how do we create sustainable local economy. So to me, when I sat down and was in this panic of like, oh no, people aren't doing equity inclusion work because they feel overwhelmed, and people are going back to resourcing organizations that didn't have the infrastructure to serve the vulnerable groups, I came up with this project and sought out leaders in my network to give us 10 minutes of their thoughts, so that everyone could be trained on their own time. They could watch it with their team, or they could watch it with a cup of tea. So this is meant, we got enough funding to just make it free for people online. So I want people to keep using this resource. It's really quite powerful. Some places we actually show, for the training, we are showing the films and having dialogues with staff and leadership, but other people, you can just do it on your own. So I just want people, if you want to continue this conversation or have questions, there's a ton there in the version of videos and also a podcast. And then I mentioned that I was supporting Black Lives Matter statements and asking people to be really genuine in the process. And so I came up with these 5 A's, or the things that I was saying over and over and over again. And I just want to leave these with people. You know, Ibram Kendi wrote in his book, How to Be an Anti-Racist. And it's not enough just to say that you're not racist, that you actually have to actively be undoing racism, undoing whiteness, you know, acknowledging whiteness. And so I came up with these 5 A's of acknowledge, align, amplify, ask, and activate. And so acknowledge the reality that we're in, align with communities and individuals that have been historically marginalized to partner up and deepen relationship, amplify the voices that have been left out. BIPOC stands for Black and Indigenous and People of Color. I ask people also think about Asians because they often get invisibilized. Ask people in communities what they need. Don't assume, try not to make assumptions. And then activate. Use whatever is in your sphere of influence. It might be money, it might be social networks, it might be time, it might be your expertise, but whatever your resources are, activate them to help move this work along. So this is my like little guidepost that it came to me one night, and I'm hoping it's useful to people. Um, and then in this PowerPoint, there's the Bridge newsletter about what we're up to right now, and then my sort of philosophies and reflections and ruminations about all the things that are happening. So those two really work well together, those newsletters, for you to get a sense of what Bridge and I are up to. Um, and tomorrow night, there's a session on white allyship if you're interested, and if you are, you'll find it on our website. And then Beverly Tatum is one of my mentors and people that I love in multicultural education. And I am very excited that she accepted to do a fireside chat with me. So to kick off the school year in Berkshire County, we're going to be talking about diversity in education. And it's really cool to have someone that I read and study and quote all the time, as like we're going to be in a conversation together. So I'm very excited about that. And I'm partnered with Central Berkshire Regional School District to bring her. And Williams College has come on as a sponsor, and so is the United Way. And we've decided to open it up to all the different school districts. So if you have anyone connected to school districts, it's really an opportunity to have her in the Berkshires. I'm going to be doing training for Nonprofit Center of the Berkshires soon. The fall dates are going to be out, right?
They're up on our web, and I have to say personally, we really appreciate you as a resource. I find all these things I've pulled from and shared really, really helpful. You have a knack of making things, you know, in understandable chunks and digestible language and digestible feelings, and you know, you have a really great way of doing that, and I particularly appreciate that because you know, I can be fragile, and so I, you know, I need that support, and you're so good at that, and we're really, I feel in the Berkshires we're super lucky to have you, and I am glad that you said what you said about not being too busy, because you know, we all nonprofits tend to do that, right? We expand where the need is, and we just find the power somehow. Mostly it's because we all have very dedicated, amazing people working with us. Yes. And we have this incredibly generous community, which I always like to mention, because sometimes I don't want to take anyone for granted. We just have this community that when something happens, they put their money in, they put their time and their expertise in, and that's what makes it possible, A, for us to have all these nonprofits, but B, for organizations like Bridge and Construct and the Nonprofit Center, all of whom have grown to keep expanding and adding services. And so, it's great that you're here at a time when we, otherwise we'd be hiring out of Boston, right? To have people come and train. And it's not like that's not a good thing too, but it's great to have somebody who's got so much expertise and so much experience now over 13 years working in our own community. So I want to check the chat room to see if there's any questions, because we have a few minutes, and I will direct them to you. One of the questions was, do you coordinate with local food pantries in the food work that you do?
Yes, those are the folks I'm talking about that, in partnership with the United Way, part of the COVID response funding was for Bridge to work alongside to help them improve their relationships that Liana was talking about, so that the vulnerable communities feel like they can go to pantries and churches. The folks that aren't coming. So far, the people that were those 90 families, we're still trying to build the bridge. I mean, our name Bridge is there for a reason. Like, we are trying to bridge them, to the organizations that exist. And so, yes, the answer is yes, the short answer, but yeah.
So is there anything you'd like to add before we go on? I do know we might want to talk a little bit in the 3 or 4 minutes that we have left about how people can help. I mean, any way, every way, small ways, big ways.
So one way is showing up to all the things that we offer. So really, like, coming to these sessions I mentioned and having the conversations, because we put a lot of energy into the things that we just give to the community freely, so having them populated is helpful. And then I think then when we actually do like sort of one-on-one or focused work, you already have a baseline from being in community and being with other people. You also learn from other people. We can facilitate a space to learn from your peers. So that's really important. And donating is really important. All of us as nonprofits can use contributions, and we have so many ways that you can do that. There's one-time gifts, there's sustaining gifts, there's like sponsoring particular campaigns. Volunteering, I think about any skill that you have, Bridge could use. So just being in touch with us, that's what you're willing to offer, and I bet I could put it to use. So I think that's pretty much it. But and keep educating yourself around anti-racism, because it's really crucial that we make history this time move forward and not look back. So I'm just hoping that people dig in, even if they don't think it impacts them, it does. And a lot of people are putting stock in the young people and their organizing, but I don't want all of us at all the different points we are in our stage of life not to do the work that we need to do to make that organizing really effective. So no one from age, 5 to 100 can sleep right now, right? We all have work to do around this. And so I want people to feel that they're a part of this work. And that's it. Just tell people about us, share our stuff on social media, and
Terrific.
Thank
you. Thank you for finding time for us. And I always learn something when I speak with you, and we really appreciate you sharing all that. And I know that people will be going to the website. I myself want to look at some of the Pathways recordings. I think now in our Zoom world, right, and our quarantined lives, having that ability to do that on your own is sort of great. So thank you for making that available, and to all the people who funded that work. Yes. Always thanking the funders.
Yes, I couldn't do any of this without volunteers and funders. So you're right. Thank you.
So if you would stop sharing your screen.
Want your screen back? That's good.
And you are welcome to hang out with us. You don't have to show your video, and you can mute yourself, but we'll move on to Construct, and if you're busy, please go, but you're more than welcome to hang out with Jane and June and me as well.
No, I would love to hear Jane and June, so I might turn off my screen, but I'm gonna stay, and thank you for Jane and June hanging out with me, so thank you.
Always a pleasure.
Thank you, and thank you, Liana, for having me, and thank you, Ali. So
yes, Ali, thank you for creating this class. Yeah. Megan's always thinking of good things to do.
Absolutely, it's our pleasure.
Hi.
Hi, Andy. So yeah, so we're going to move on now. We could give people a minute if they need to get a drink of water. I'll make my introductions slowly. But and again, it's always so interesting. I sort of did this on purpose, but not really, that the work of some of our nonprofits does cross over in many ways. And we all know each other because we have to, and we want to, and we're obviously inspired by each other. So we have with us today, in my left corner of my Brady Bunch screen, Jane Ralph, the Executive Director of Construct, and June Wolfe, who is actually a Berkshire Nonprofit Awards recipient. Was that 2 years ago?
Yeah, it was the first year you did it.
Yeah. So June is very, very active, and I know Jane appreciates her a whole lot. So we have the Jane and June show. So Jane, I'm going to start with you.
Okay.
And just ask you to tell us the path that led you to the position you have now at Construct.
I have worked in a lot of places in the nonprofit universe, whether it's been in urban areas like Washington, D.C., New York, Kansas City, as well as rural areas like Wisconsin and Vermont. I moved here from Vermont. And what's interesting is regardless of what the job has been, whether it's been working in the domestic violence field, whether it's been working in LGBTQIA issues, working in faith communities, the importance of housing has always been really central, whether it's been part of the stated mission or not. There's something crucial about having a roof over your head, a safe place for you and your family to be, a safe neighborhood to live in, that makes such a difference in terms of safety, in terms of health, in terms of being accepted. If queer youth are often the ones who are kicked out of their homes, queer youth of color even more so. And so the importance of having a home, having a safe place to live, has been really, really important to me from early on. I have been blessed to have that in my life. I've never been homeless myself, but I've known an awful lot of people who have. And so the opportunity to come here to the Berkshires in, I guess I would say, my last chapter of hopefully working life, I do hope to retire someday, was just a real great opportunity, even before I met June and the other colleagues I have at Construct, and before I met the incredible board of directors that we have. But it really ended up seeming like the right thing at the right time for so many reasons. And so I guess that's part of what brought me here.
So you've been with Construct how long now?
I am starting my 4th year in September.
And Construct is how old, remind me?
We're in our 51st year, and I'm only the 3rd executive director. So with me having been here a little over 3 years, that means that the other 2 were there a long time.
Yes. And Construct also has grown over the years and is certainly a beloved South County organization like Bridge and VIM and some of the other organizations that we've had in this particular Zoom class. So tell us a little bit about the work that Construct does and what's happening now. Everything's changed. So tell us what's going on at Construct.
On the one hand, we're doing what Construct has always done for over 50 years, trying to ensure that all of our neighbors have a great place to live, a great roof over their head, a neighborhood that accepts them, in a community that accepts them. We've been about building inclusive communities, inclusive neighborhoods, and good, solid places for folks to live, really through our whole history. What's making that more urgent is affordable housing has been a challenge in the South Berkshires for many years, probably since, I don't know, I'm not sure when this really evolved from being a manufacturing-based community to a hospitality-based area. But certainly since then, it's been really important to have affordable housing. We can't have a hospitality industry if we don't have good places for folks to live who work in that industry. And so when GE fell by the wayside and the economy shifted, then the economy shifted again in 2008, affordable housing was and still is a huge component of what makes a good community. COVID has just made that even more so. If you read The Edge this morning, there was a great article with one of our board members, Barney Stein, about how even more than usual, the real estate industry is really booming in this area, and things are selling almost before they get listed. That makes it really hard for folks who need an affordable place to live to find it, whether it's a rental unit, whether it's affordable home ownership. And so that's what Construct's always been about, whether it's folks coming out of homelessness or what we call our vital workforce. We've been about helping people be able to live in the community where they work. And I usually kind of talk about it at the 10,000 foot view, and then let June take the hard questions about how we actually do it. But it's always been about supporting folks getting access to that great housing and then being able to sustain it economically and in every other way. So June has really focused in recent years on the housing development side of it, as well as the property management. We've had other staff who focused more on the other direct services. So June, you want to hop in for a minute?
Sure. Yeah, I'm about as old as Gwen in my profession with Construct. I've been there 13 years now, and moving from we started at the same time, and moving from property management to development because we were in the middle of a project, and our executive director was retiring, and there was a need for somebody to carry that. And so I was basically learned it on the fly, and that's when I won that award, because that's when we developed Forest Springs in Great Barrington. And so Construct has taken a little bit of a divergent path from there, in that we are trying to work with the small towns in South County. Small towns aren't necessarily looking for 45 units at a time or 50 units at a time. You know, they prefer to do smaller things. And so we've moved into a couple other directions. One is receivership. Another one is, working with towns on, we're actually did something with Habitat for Humanity not that long ago. We tried to do some home ownership units. Even moving some houses, that's not happening at the moment, but we have been working on moving some donated houses to another town and turning them into affordable housing. So we're just trying to get creative because of the limitations that rural living puts on development, affordable housing development.
So tell us, either of you, something that we might not know about Construct, a kind of well-hidden factoid or something that generally people are surprised to hear.
One of the things I would love to share is something brand new that we're just getting started with. We've been partnering with Greylock Federal Credit Union for a while to provide security, microloans for security deposits for folks who are in our own properties. Often folks have that first month's rent, but they don't have first, last, and security deposit. That's really hard to come up with if you're living paycheck to paycheck, and especially now in COVID. So we worked with them to develop a microloan program. When COVID hit, we really upped our capacity, thanks to very generous donors, to do rental assistance. We were very concerned that the moratorium on eviction, while a great idea and we fully support it, might backfire a little bit as folks got farther and farther behind in being able to pay their rent as they took care of other needs. So we really upped our game in terms of rental assistance and have raised over $220,000 to be able to administer that those grants, and we'll be giving out, when all is said and done, at least $210,000. We've given out over 100,000 already, but to be eligible for those those grants, you have to be, I'm not going to get too far in the weeds on this, but you have to be at a certain level of income or lower, 80% or 100% of area median income or lower to be eligible, because that's what most of the funders require. That's what's really defined as affordable, being eligible for affordable housing, and that's really our service area. What we were learning is there's a lot of folks who are a little bit higher in income, but who are still not able to make ends meet, because there's a lot of rents in the South Berkshires that are very expensive. And if you've got a really good job and you're working all your hours, you can afford that $2,500 rent. If you're not, it's a whole lot harder. So if you're not an essential worker, if you're not able to work from home, folks are falling through the cracks, even though they still have what would be considered in most areas a decent income. So we came up with an idea to expand that microloan program to folks at those levels. So starting in August, folks will be able to apply through Construct, but we'll immediately pass those who are eligible off to Greylock Federal Credit Union, apply for up to $2,500 to be able to make ends meet, and then they'll have, what is it, June, 3 years to pay it off?
No, it's only 2 years, but it's they have 3 months of deferment on the loan, and then they can extend it to 6 months of deferment if they need it, and if they do a financial counseling session with Greylock.
So while the center of our universe is really, again, great places folks can afford to live, without economic stability, that doesn't really work. So we've always had those two prongs. And then we've also always tried to work with folks to get other supports that they need. Sometimes the barriers to being able to afford where you live have nothing to do with the economics. They have to do with, again, safety. If you're fleeing domestic violence, you may have enough money, but you may not be able to sustain a household yourself. If there's other family dynamics that are difficult, if there are health issues, all of those things are challenging, and even more so now during COVID. So we work very closely with Volunteers in Medicine, with CHP, with Fairview, with the Breen Center, with all of the health and mental health providers to make sure that end is also held up. So we really try to, again, work with the whole household to keep them safe and secure in their home.
I was just going to ask you who you work with, since we're all so interconnected nowadays, maybe even more so.
Right.
And that leads me to a question that I have about silver linings. We've all found some in the things that are happening, and thank goodness for that, because without silver linings, I'd be really, really, really depressed. So I'm happy that we're moving in the racial and social justice sphere, and I hope that keeps going. Tell us about what silver linings might there be in the housing industry, or even in just the work that you do and how you're doing it now.
There are so many, and I can't tell you how helpful it is for me personally right now to focus on that, because I don't know if you looked at the New York Times this morning, but at this point, almost everyone is having a harder time with COVID, and those who are most vulnerable are having an even harder time. And I'm not all that vulnerable, but it's tough to continue to work in this small bedroom and to know that I can't get out there and work with people safely the way I want to. So to focus on the silver linings really is a helpful question. I would say one of the silver linings is, again, the generosity of our community. Folks have been so incredibly generous, so incredibly creative. Having the community partners that we have, hearing immediately from one of our restaurants and lodges, Racebrook Lodge, calling us and Volunteers in Medicine and saying, hey, we're closed. We want to be able to provide housing for first responders and folks who are affected by COVID who can't safely stay at home. How can we do that? So we immediately put that in motion. Again, the rental assistance. Finding out that not only is it not good for us to have our offices in the middle of our transitional housing on good days, but it's really unhealthy for the men in whose house we were officing, as well as ourselves. So to finally be able to get moved out of that, whether it's again to work from home or to work in new office space that we're starting to develop, some of those things that we've wanted to do have now become a necessity, and we're like, oh, okay, that wasn't just a good idea, this was really smart. June, what have you got?
Well, I would say that this has been a true test of our philosophy of housing. And that is, I'm going to go back to your former question, one thing that people don't know about Construct, and that is that we house a variety of incomes. So when we go to develop housing in someone's community, and I go to a lot of town meetings, we get a really hard pushback because people have this image of what affordable housing is. I think it looks something like projects in a big city, and they get very, very fearful. And we are not just, we're housing people of all incomes. We house people from across the spectrum. And so we have this community of people who we try to create safe neighborhoods for people. So we move people in, and we carefully, balance the neighborhoods so that we have diversity and we have economic diversity, and we have strong people who can help out other people. And I think that COVID has been a real test of that, because I worried at the very beginning when lockdown came that we were going to have a lot of trouble with people, that vulnerable people were really going to respond badly to it. And that's not what happened. So we were delighted to know that people, even though they were stuck in one place, they felt like it was a good place to be stuck in. And they were looking out for each other. And it was pretty wonderful. So we were able to kind of change how we approached our existing property management. We have a property manager, but we also put in place a housing navigator who could work with the most vulnerable people, but that person was not overwhelmed. So, but that person could also connect people to rental assistance. And so even the rental assistance program was not overwhelmed. So I feel like we're doing it right. And that was a good message to get. So now we're trying to streamline things and use technology to make it easier to communicate. So we're doing like a maintenance software program and a rent collection software program, so that we don't have to go knocking on doors all the time. We can communicate with people, and it's going slow, but it's going.
Another thing that's been really exciting has been getting to know more of the landlords through this rental assistance giving. Over 100 households have been helped with this program so far, and that's been over 45 landlords. So most of the landlords are what we call mom and pop. They've got 1, 2, 3 units. These are not, again, what June said, the 45 unit buildings, because there just aren't that many of them. And these landlords are depending on the rent to be able to make ends meet for themselves. And so to be able to work together in a cooperative way rather than having it be an adversarial approach has I think made a really big difference. And landlords are passing on the savings they have if they've been able to get rental forbearance to their tenants. Tenants are paying what they can, and it's just a much more collaborative approach, which is something that I love about the Berkshires. I see more of that here than probably anywhere I've worked. It's not perfect, but there's an awful lot that's good about here.
Yes, I would agree with that 100%. So I had a good thought and I just lost it.
I want to jump in again to piggyback on some of the things that Gwendolyn said. It was really important to us that the folks who needed the rental assistance the most were able to get to it. And that's not always folks who have a computer at home. It's not always folks who can just jump online, grab it off our website and get to it. So we partnered most closely with Volunteers in Medicine on that, and they actually set up a whole station of places where folks could come in, get some help for the application. We had it in Spanish and English, and so I think over 40% of the rental assist that we've done so far have been for folks who have come to us through Volunteers in Medicine, and many from the recent immigrant community. So that's some of those so-called hidden populations that we depend on so deeply here in the Berkshires for everyone's quality of life. So making sure those folks were able to stay safely housed was critical, in part because many of the folks are essential workers. And as we've been saying, now more than ever, housing is healthcare.
Yes. So again, we're all interconnected. I know that at any one time you have a pretty long waiting list for affordable housing. Yeah. Has that increased at all? And what is that number at this point?
I just actually looked at it this week, and we went from about 700 on our permanent housing wait list last year, and we're at 500 now. So over the past year, we've been able to trim that down, not just obviously through our own housing. Our own 88 units wouldn't do that, but we've been able to help folks get housed, whether with us or with someone else. But 500 is still way too many, and so it's a big challenge. On our transitional housing wait list, that's for folks who are coming out of homelessness. We have about 80 currently. I want to say about 50 women and about 30 men. We also definitely serve folks who are queer and non-binary, but most of the folks identify as male or female.
What are we heading in the right direction as the Berkshires in terms of affordable housing, or is it very slow? Is it my imagination, or is progress slow?
All of the above. We're heading in the right direction, but progress is slow.
Right.
Yeah. Again, so there's other buildings going in, and those are really large, and that's gonna, so right now, there's only 2 towns in the Berkshires that have 10% affordable housing. You know, that there's a state mandate that says all towns need to have it. Stockbridge and Williamstown. But Great Barrington is bumping their heads on it, and I think this new project that is being built right now will put them over the top, which is exciting. And also, for the first time, Habitat for Humanity is looking at South County. We did a feasibility study for them to do a project in Housatonic. So that'll be the first affordable home ownership project in South County, which is very exciting. Lenox is also very close, although much of their affordable housing is for elders, but I think that's kind of starting to shift. As I say, the difficulty is working with the smaller towns. Many of those towns are at 0. They have no affordable housing. Many of those towns have almost no rentals, which is another reason that we looked at the rental assistance program when COVID hit, because you can't have affordable housing if you don't have rentals, and you can't have rentals if you don't have landlords. And so the eviction moratorium sounded great, but if it puts our landlords out of business, then our tenants are in trouble. So it's, everyone likes to make landlords the bad guy, but you gotta have them. And so it's good for us that we worked with many of them.
So did I understand correctly that if someone owned a home and wanted to sell it, let's say, or they were moving into a retirement community, whatever, that there would be an opportunity to work with Construct to turn it into affordable housing?
It's certainly an option.
Certainly an option.
How does that work? Tell us how that works in case someone out there has a house that they think should be a great rental.
Warning though, I enter acronymville when I start doing this. So if someone wanted to turn their house into affordable housing and they wanted that to count toward the town's statistics on affordable housing, then we would have to get the town involved, because it's to get it registered, it needs an affordable housing deed and a restriction on the deed. And so, and the town has to accept that deed and move that deed forward through something called an LIP, a local initiative program. And then there's, depending on if it just wants to be one unit, if it's already one unit and it just wants to be one unit, that's pretty easy. Then we can just do a local action unit, an LAU. If you want to turn it into multiple units, then you have to go through a process with the planning board called a 40B program, because there is systemic bias against affordable housing in the Berkshires. And that is that most of our zoning codes were designed to inhibit multi-unit housing. And so part of that, that 10% I talked about, that's part of the 40B law, which came out in 1969. So, you know, we've had time to work on this. And it says that if a town doesn't have more than 10% affordable housing, or you know, 10% or more, then their zoning laws are basically moot. If someone wants to develop affordable housing, they're allowed to change the density, the frontage, the height, you know, the parking, like whatever inhibitions have been put on, then the developer is allowed to change it. So usually when construct does it, we try to do something called a friendly 40B, which is where we go to the town and the selectmen and we work with their affordable housing trust or whatever committee they might have and say, what is it you want? Where do you want it? Let's work together to make this happen in a way that's, you know, that works for everyone.
Wow, that's interesting. I did not know any of that. That's really cool. Yeah, this is the good stuff here that we want to know. So we have about 15 minutes left, and certainly we would like questions from Ollie folks if you have any, now that we're getting into some nitty-gritty interesting stuff.
Something we haven't mentioned that's a little bit, I don't know, it's not off mission for us, but it's kind of adjacent mission, is a new program we've started with Greenagers, and Railroad Street Youth is going to be part of it as well, called Pathways to the Trades. One of the things we noticed when we were building Forest Springs is that most of the contractors were in their 50s, if not older. And while that's great, that's not very sustainable. So in talking with some of them and in getting to know some of those folks, we learned that there aren't that many people going into the trades here in the Berkshires. And it's a really good, not just well-paying job, but it's a really creative, wonderful, meaningful career. And so we started working with Monument Mountain High School to create pathways to the trades for youth and young adults, to be able to consider that as a way to remain in the Berkshires if they want to, and to help the trades professions continue. In the South Berkshires, the trades are one of the largest employers, even though it's almost all small businesses. It's not, and that's not something that for example, Berkshire Blueprint necessarily notices, because in the larger areas, the big professions are hospitality, healthcare, advanced manufacturing, and those are important. But in the South Berkshires, it's more the small shops, the subcontractors, the electricians, the plumbers, the carpenters. And that's really crucial for the sustainability of the South Berkshires. So we're working together to try to make sure that pathway is possible for people.
I love that idea, that concept, and it's not only happening in South Berkshire, but it is really important for anyone who's ever needed any one of those skills, you know, and there's some pressure these days on women to get their own hammer and figure it out for themselves. I am a big believer in letting people do what they're best at, and so I don't want to have to do those things. So we need more people to do that.
for those either non-binary folks or women who want to be in the trades, there's much more pay equity in the trades than almost any other field in our area. So it's a pathway to a sustainable career regardless of your gender.
So if I want to do,
and actually, I've got to ask June to tell my favorite story about your family and about your kids, if you're willing to. About how they put themselves through school.
Oh yeah. So I have to say that I had a real bias. My dad was all about, you're all going to college. And one of our kids said, I would rather go to trade school. And I thought, all right, that's college. So he went to trade school. He had, by the time he was 24, he had his own business and his own home and no college debt. And so then when my younger son wanted to go to an out-of-state school, I said, well, what's your plan? And he became a carpenter, and he worked his way through as a carpenter. I won't say he doesn't have any debt, but he is now a general contractor, and he's now 25, and he's doing very well as a general contractor. So yeah, I had to really change my bias about that, because really, like, my youngest worked her way through school as a barista at, $11 an hour. And these two were working at $25 an hour right off the bat. So that was a much more sustainable choice for them.
Yeah, that's interesting. So you're telling me if I want to get another job that actually makes money, I should learn how to do that stuff.
Definitely. I'd go into HVAC, a little less of the kneeling and hammer swinging.
Well, at the phase that we're at with Pathways, really what we're looking for, and this might be something that some of the folks who are participating have, is we're looking for mentors. Mentors for some of these folks. You may get on a work site and you may have a great boss, but that's not always the person you want to turn to if you have questions. And so we want to set up this cadre of mentors who have some of that background, who can walk alongside the folks in the Pathways program while they're getting on job sites, while they're getting this good pay, so they can figure out how to go through licensure, so they can figure out what they need and all of those kind of things without having to ask their boss.
Yeah, I think that's a disadvantage to the trades, is that so many contractors hire these young kids as subs. And so they need their own workman's comp and their own insurance and their own rig and their own truck, and and they have to do their own taxes, and so to have someone who can walk them through that and help them make those really hard decisions at a very young age is invaluable.
So that's a great actual segue to the question that we always end up with, which is how people can help. I imagine there are multiple ways. You mentioned having a really good board. You could talk a little bit more about that, because I'm sure that OLLI folks, more so than many other groups, serve on boards,
Right.
In their phase of life and as adult learners. That's a great place to grab a new board member. So tell us a little bit about what that's like and what other ways are to help.
Can I just add to that, though, that it isn't just being on our board. Every town needs affordable housing committee. So if you're a selectman, then these are things that you should know about your town. Do you have enough affordable housing? And if not, why not? And if you do, where is it? If you're not a selectman, and does your town have an affordable housing committee or a housing committee or an affordable housing trust? That's somewhere that you can get involved, and and then you could be the advisor to the selectman, or planning board or zoning board. This is all good things that you can do right in your town, and you can pave the way for affordable housing in your area. Go ahead, Jane, I'm sorry.
Sure, no, that's great. And one of the things that's really great about having a good board is we're not hungry for new board members at any given time. So we have a pathway for that as well. And we ask folks to spend at least a year on one of our board committees or volunteering. We've got a really robust real estate committee, not surprisingly, to help advise us on all of these opportunities. We have a strong finance committee. Development, of course, is always a big issue, and we have a great development committee. We just started in the last year an advocacy committee, because we can do all the great work in the world, and if there aren't good laws and good enforcement of those laws, then it's very difficult to make change. And so we've got an advocacy committee that focuses on that, primarily at the state level, but also with local legislation, so towns can strengthen their infrastructure to create better affordable housing. So we really encourage folks to get involved in the committee level. We also are, one of the things we've learned is that it's really important when someone calls and is in a panic because they're not sure how they're going to pay their rent or whatever, that they get a friendly voice at the end of the phone. And so we've always had volunteers staff our phone, usually on site, but now we're working on having that happen remotely. And it's more important than ever that that friendly voice is there. So we've got a training for folks to be able to staff our phones remotely from like 8 to noon and then 1 to 4 every day. And you don't have to know everything about affordable housing. You have to be able to listen and say, you know what, I'll get that information to you, or I'll get that message to the staff member who can help you with that. And it's made just a huge difference, even more so during COVID. One of the things that I love about Construct is, and June says this, we don't just put a roof over somebody's head and say, you know, see you when your rent is due. We really stick with people. We walk with people, and you know, we're committed to walking everybody home that needs a home.
Those sound like lots of great volunteer opportunities. We have a couple of minutes, and I was wondering what opportunities there are to donate. Are there specific campaigns happening right now, specific events, things that you need money for? Tell us where we might be putting our money if that's the way we choose to go.
Sure. Well, I think for us, we've had some really generous donors for our rental assistance, and I think we're going to need that longer. We had this naive thought that this whole thing was going to be about 6 weeks long, and then we'd get over it and everything would be fine. Obviously, that's not the case. And so rental assistance is going to be needed for much longer. So donating to that directly is important. But without being able to expand our staff capacity to continue to meet the need, to talk to all of the folks who need the support, it's really hard to keep things going. So I'm really excited that many foundations are starting to do more general operating grants so that they recognize that we need to keep our lights on. And that's not very sexy, but the ability to be able to provide that kind of support and expand staff hours to be able to meet the need that we think is going to continue to grow is also important. So general donations are always the best. The other thing that we've got is we've got what we call our House That Ernie Built brick campaign. You can go to our website, and for $25 you can buy a brick in memory of someone, in honor of someone. And it's the way that we brick by brick are trying to build affordable housing for everyone who needs it.
We gotta love the brick campaigns.
Yep.
No, that's great. Great to hear. And it sounds like you guys are both Construct and Bridge are meeting demand as best you can and getting some funding to help. Always more needed. We know that, but it sounds like I read a very interesting article about certain size organizations, nonprofits might not be with us anymore. It's that actually, if you're smaller and more nimble, you know, your budget might be this big, but actually you can pivot quickly, and that's right. Certainly the case for the nonprofit center. But it just sounds like you all are being very flexible and just rising to the occasion, and I'm always inspired by that. And if for all those foundations providing general operating support, send them my way and to Gwendolyn too, please. So thank you so much, both of you, for joining us. And I do like hearing the details sometimes, the things I don't know in other subsectors. It's very interesting to me. And then also to just think about how these things intersect, particularly when we have two nonprofit leaders serving the same groups and trying to help people have a better quality of life. I mean, that's what we're all in it for. So thank you all for joining us. And Ollie folks, same thing. Go get an iced tea, and thank you for being with us. We've got some contact info in the chat room, and I know that Megan will be happy to send out contact info as well if there are any requests. And Gwendolyn, you posted your the link in the chat room to your PowerPoint, is that right? Or to your newsletter? And also,
I couldn't upload the PowerPoint, so I just put the 2 newsletters because someone asked for the links to the meetings, and
great.
in the Bridge one, it'll have all the links to the meetings.
Great. And I know Jane's got her contact information there and the Construct website. So we're good. Thank you very much, and have a great rest of your afternoon. Andy, thank you.
Right. Thank you, everyone. This is fantastic. And we'll be sending out these links as well as a link to the recording to everybody who had signed up for the course. Since again, we're pretty sure there are several people who are not able to make it due to power issues. And we'll send the links to all of you as well.
Oh, great. That'd be great.
Great. So that's something we could like have on our website or do through our own social media
yeah, we're
as
going to
well.
post it onto our YouTube, so you'll be able to link to it from there.
Right.
Oh, thank you.
We'll share.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thanks, everybody.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Enjoy the day.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Liana. Thanks. Bye. Good to see you, Jane and June.
Bye-bye. Good to see you, Gwendolyn.
Bye-bye.